They told me to work overtime for free, so I made sure no one could log in Monday. The smell hit me first: kombucha, anxiety sweat, and the distinctive funk of too many 20-somethings who think deodorant is optional when you're disrupting industries. Welcome to ByteNest, San Francisco's hottest startup, where dreams come to die and trust funds come to play dress up as entrepreneurs. I should have known I was screwed the moment I walked through those reclaimed barn doors on my first day. The receptionist, a blonde girl who looked like she'd stepped out of a SoulCycle ad, glanced up from her MacBook covered in motivational stickers. "You must be the new diversity intern," she said with a smile so bright it could have powered the Edison bulb chandeliers hanging overhead. "I'm Chloe, the new software engineering intern," I corrected, adjusting the strap of my laptop bag. I'd driven my beat-up Honda Civic across 3 states for this opportunity, sleeping in rest stops and living off gas station coffee, burning through my last $800 to get here. "Right, same thing," she chirped, handing me a visitor badge with intern printed in Comic Sans font. Because apparently, even their badges were designed to make you feel smaller. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a company that raised $12 million in series of funding, exposed brick walls, ping pong tables no one had time to use, and more succulents than a desert botanical garden. Motivational quotes in cursive font plastered every available surface. Fail fast, succeed faster. Hustle hard, dream harder. Innovation never sleeps. Neither did their interns, apparently. My tour guide was Marcus, a 24-year-old Stanford dropout who'd been promoted to lead growth hacker after 3 months. His parents owned half of Palo Alto, but he wore thrift store flannels and talked about keeping it real while sipping $16 cold brew. "So, Chloe from Detroit," he said, emphasizing my hometown like it was a communicable disease. "Computer science from Wayne State, plus a master's in cybersecurity from Michigan. Impressive portfolio. But can you handle the Bay Area pace?" I wanted to tell him that I'd been coding since I was 12, that I'd built 3 apps that actually solved real problems instead of creating new ways for rich kids to order artisanal toast. Instead, I smiled and said, "I'm ready for anything." That was my first mistake. Marcus led me through the engineering department, where the real magic happened. Or where it was supposed to happen. What I saw instead was a disaster masquerading as innovation. Monitors displayed code that made my computer science professors weep. Variable names like thingy1 and stuff_that_works_ick littered their JavaScript files. Security protocols that would have been laughable in 2015, let alone 2024. "This is the core authentication system," Marcus said proudly, gesturing at a monitor where senior developer Jake Morrison was typing with the confidence of someone who'd never heard of SQL injection attacks. Jake was the kind of guy who wore the same faded hoodie every day and smelled faintly of energy drinks and superiority complex. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Their authentication system had more holes than a cheese grater, but apparently pointing that out wasn't part of my job description. "Your desk is over there," Marcus continued, pointing to a card table pushed against a wall next to the bathroom. No second monitor, no ergonomic chair, just a folding chair that looked like it had been rescued from a church basement sale. "You'll be working on bug fixes and documentation. Nothing too complex. We need to make sure you can handle the basics before we trust you with the real stuff." The real stuff was apparently Jake Morrison's code, which I'd already identified as having at least 14 critical vulnerabilities in the 30 seconds I'd glimpsed a screen. My first week was a masterclass in microaggressions and systemic negligence. While the white male interns got invited to architecture meetings and code reviews, I was assigned tasks that a computer science freshman could complete blindfolded. Update the README file. Test the login button. Make sure the contact form sends emails. Meanwhile, Tyler Chin, who'd started the same day as me, was already pushing commits to the main branch. Tyler had gone to UC Berkeley and had the same credentials as me, minus the cybersecurity master's degree. But Tyler also had something I didn't: the right chromosome combination and a trust fund that let him work for free without calculating whether he could afford both rent and groceries. "It's not about favoritism," explained Sarah Kim, the head of people operations, when I finally worked up the courage to ask about more substantial assignments during my second week. Sarah was one of those people who'd mastered the art of saying nothing while using a lot of words. We have a very deliberate onboarding process. We need to make sure everyone can handle the foundational work before moving to more advanced projects. Foundational work. That's what they called fixing their senior developers' mistakes while getting 0 credit. I started staying late, not because I wanted to, but because that's what everyone else did. The ByteNest culture worshipped overwork like a religion. Leaving before 8 p.m. was considered lazy. Working weekends was showing initiative. The founders, Brad and Chad, yes, really, walked around in hoodies that probably cost more than my monthly rent, talking about grinding and the hustle, while their parents' connections secured their next round of funding. This is what separates us from the corporate drones, Brad announced during a mandatory all-hands meeting 3 weeks into my internship. We're not here for work-life balance. We're here to change the world. You can sleep when you're successful. Easy to say when your definition of success was inherited. The breaking point came during my 4th week. I'd just finished fixing a critical bug in their payment processing system, a bug that could have compromised thousands of user credit cards if it had gone live. It was complex work that required understanding their entire database architecture and implementing a new validation layer. I'd worked until 2 a.m. to get it right. The next morning, I found Jake Morrison presenting my solution to the engineering team, explaining it like he'd discovered fire. "Great work, Jake," Sarah said, taking notes on her iPad. "This kind of proactive problem-solving is exactly what we're looking for in our junior developers." I sat in the back of the conference room, invisible as always, watching Jake accept praise for 15 hours of my unpaid labor. When the meeting ended, I approached him directly. "That was my code," I said, keeping my voice level. Jake looked confused, like I'd just spoken in ancient Sumerian. "What code?" "The payment validation fix. I submitted it yesterday at 2:17 a.m. Check the Git logs." His confusion transformed into condescension. "Look, Chloe, I know you're eager to contribute, but that fix required understanding of our entire system architecture. You've been here a month. Maybe you helped with some of the documentation, but I rewrote your entire validation function because it was checking user input on the client side only. Anyone with basic JavaScript knowledge could have stolen credit card information. I implemented server-side validation with sanitization protocols and..." Okay. Jake held up his hands like I was an aggressive dog. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but maybe run these ideas by me next time before implementing anything? We can't have interns making changes to critical systems without oversight." Without oversight. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. That night, I sat in my studio apartment, if you could call a converted closet with a hot plate and apartment, eating 70-cent ramen and calculating how much longer I could survive in San Francisco on my savings. My idealism was dying a slow death, suffocated by the gap between ByteNest's promises and their reality. They'd promised mentorship. I got isolation. They'd promised learning opportunities. I got busy work. They'd promised a pathway to full-time employment. I got pizza parties and thank you Slack emojis. But they'd made one crucial mistake in their exploitation. They'd given me complete access to their codebase, assuming I was too junior, too grateful, too invisible to be a threat. They had no idea what I was capable of. As I stared at my laptop screen, reflecting on 4 weeks of systematic dismissal and wage theft disguised as opportunity, something shifted inside me. The naive girl who'd driven across the country believing in meritocracy was gone. In her place was someone who understood exactly how this game was played. And I was about to change the rules. I started documenting everything 3 days after Jake Morrison stole credit for my work. Not because I had some grand plan for revenge. I'm not that calculating, or at least I wasn't then. I did it because my therapist back in Detroit had always told me to keep records when people made you question your own reality. Gaslighting thrives in the absence of evidence, she'd said. ByteNest was a gaslighting factory. The folder on my laptop was innocuously named Team Communications. Inside, I methodically saved every broken promise, every moving goalpost, every casual cruelty disguised as constructive feedback. Screenshots of Slack messages, forwarded emails, even voice memos I recorded after particularly brutal meetings. The collection started small. A screenshot of Marcus's message from my second week. "Hey Chloe, need you to stay late tonight to help prep for tomorrow's demo. Team effort." Rocket sent at 6:47 p.m. on a Friday, like my weekend plans were automatically forfeit. Then came the email from Sarah Kim, subject line, "Exciting opportunity. Hi Chloe. Great news. We're creating a special documentation project that would be perfect for your skill set. While it's still an unpaid position, there's potential for a future stipend once we secure our Series B funding. This is exactly the kind of initiative-taking that leads to full-time offers." Future stipend. I'd learned that future was ByteNest speak for never. The voice memos started during my 5th week, recorded during my increasingly frequent escapes to the coffee shop across the street. I'd order a $2 black coffee, all I could afford, and whisper into my phone like I was conducting my own mental health podcast. Day 32 in startup hell. I recorded on a particularly brutal Tuesday. Jake Morrison just asked me to clean up his authentication module. By clean up, he means completely rewrite it because he's apparently never heard of password hashing. But when I suggested implementing BCRYPT instead of storing passwords in plain text, yes, plain text like we're living in 1995, he told me I should focus on less technical solutions until I understand their unique architecture. I paused the recording to laugh bitterly. Their unique architecture is held together with digital duct tape and prayer. The coffee shop became my sanctuary. Between the exposed brick walls and indie music, I could pretend I was just another creative type working on the next big thing, instead of a woman watching her career dreams get fed through a paper shredder. Day 45, I whispered into my phone during week 7. Tyler Chin just got promoted to junior developer. Tyler, who asked me yesterday how to center a div in CSS. Meanwhile, I'm still on documentation duty, even though I've fixed 3 critical security vulnerabilities that could have bankrupted this company. But sure, let's promote the guy who thinks GitHub is a dating app for programmers. The breaking point wasn't gradual. It was surgical, precise, delivered with the efficiency of a well-timed punchline. ByteNest's monthly Fun Friday was supposed to boost morale. Instead, it boosted my understanding of exactly what these people thought of me. The event was held at a trendy bar in Soma, the kind of place where a single cocktail cost more than my daily food budget. I nursed a $7 beer and watched my colleagues network with a shameless desperation of people who confused proximity to wealth with actual success. I was standing near the bar, invisible as usual, when I overheard Jake Morrison talking to Brett Anderson, another senior developer. They were drunk enough to think they were whispering, loud enough that I caught every word. "Honestly don't know why we keep extending her internship," Jake slurred, gesturing with his craft cocktail. "She's not learning anything, and she's always asking these weird technical questions that don't even apply to what we're building." "Come on, man," Brett replied, though his tone suggested he was playing devil's advocate rather than actually disagreeing. "She seems smart. Her portfolio is solid." Jake snorted. "Portfolio schmortfolio. Look, I'm not racist or anything, but we both know why she's really here. HR needs their diversity checkbox checked. Keep one around for the team photos, you know? Makes the investors happy." The words hit me like ice water. Diversity checkbox. 6 years of computer science education, 3 internships, a cybersecurity master's degree, countless nights debugging code until my eyes burned. And to them, I was a prop. A token. A box to check on some corporate diversity scorecard. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. That would imply I still had emotional investment in this place. What cracked was the last vestige of my professional optimism, the naive belief that merit would eventually triumph over bias. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Day 51. I whispered, stepping outside into the San Francisco chill. Jake Morrison just called me a diversity checkbox. Not to my face, obviously. He doesn't have the spine for that. But loud enough for half the bar to hear. Brett Anderson just laughed and ordered another round. I paused, watching the fog roll in from the bay, turning the city lights into watercolor smears. You know what the funny thing is? They're right about one thing. I am here to check a box, but not the one they think. I'm here to check the box labeled, "What happens when you systematically underestimate someone who has root access to your entire digital infrastructure?" I saved the recording to my team communications folder and went home to plan. The Monday after Jake Morrison called me a diversity checkbox, I arrived at the office with a new sense of purpose. Not the naive enthusiasm I'd brought from Detroit, but something sharper. Surgical. I sat at my card table desk, opened my laptop, and did what I'd been trained to do. I solved problems. ByteNest's authentication system wasn't just broken, it was a digital house of cards held together by luck and user apathy. Any competent hacker could have breached it with tools from 2010. But here's the thing about broken systems. When you're the only one who understands how broken they are, you hold all the power. I started small, subtle. Performance optimization. I called it in my commit messages. Refactoring authentication module for improved efficiency. Streamlining user validation processes. Optimizing database queries for faster response times. Technical jargon that sounded impressive, but meant nothing to the liberal arts majors running this company. Brad and Chad nodded approvingly when Marcus mentioned my proactive optimization work during the weekly stand-up, probably thinking I was finally embracing the ByteNest hustle culture. If only they knew. The beauty of being invisible is that no one watches you. Jake Morrison was too busy taking credit for other people's work to review my commits. Tyler Chin was too focused on his new junior developer responsibilities to notice what the documentation in turn was actually doing. And the senior leadership? They couldn't read code if their Series B funding depended on it. I had complete autonomy to rewrite their digital foundation, one elegant line at a time. The failsafe took me 3 weeks to design. It needed to be sophisticated enough to lock down the entire system, but invisible enough to pass any casual code review. More importantly, it needed to look like a legitimate security feature until the exact moment it wasn't. I built it into the core authentication module, buried deep in what appeared to be standard input validation. To anyone skimming the code, it looked like enhanced security protocols, additional encryption layers, multi-factor authentication prep, redundant verification steps. The kind of professional, thorough work that a cybersecurity master's graduate might implement. Which technically it was. The trigger mechanism was elegant in its simplicity. Every login attempt would pass through my enhanced validation system, which would check for a specific sequence, a digital key that existed nowhere in ByteNest's documentation because I'd never documented it. Without that sequence, entered in a precise order during the authentication handshake, the system would interpret every login attempt as a potential security breach. And ByteNest's response to potential security breaches? Complete lockdown. No exceptions. I tested it obsessively, creating isolated sandbox environments where I could simulate the lockdown without affecting the live system. The code was beautiful, clean, logical, and utterly devastating. Once triggered, it would lock out every user, from unpaid interns to the CEO, until someone entered the unlock sequence that only existed in my head. Chloe's really stepping up her game. I overheard Marcus telling Sarah Kim during my 6th week of preparation. Her optimization work has improved system response times by 15%. 15%. They thought that was the point. The irony was delicious. They praised me for the very work that would destroy them, patting themselves on the back for finally recognizing my potential, while I systematically gained control of their digital infrastructure. During my 7th week, ByteNest announced they'd landed the investor pitch that would secure their Series B funding. $12 million from venture capital firm Meridian Partners, conditional on a successful product demonstration the following Monday. The entire company buzzed with excitement. Open bar celebrations, impromptu team photos, Slack channels flooded with celebration emojis. I smiled for the group photo, standing in the back row where diversity checkboxes belonged, while mentally finalizing the deployment schedule for my masterpiece. Friday night. That's when ByteNest pushed all routine updates, during off-peak hours when user traffic was minimal. The perfect time to deploy enhanced security protocols that no one would question until Monday morning, when they'd need every system running flawlessly for the most important presentation in company history. This is it, team. Brad announced during the Thursday all-hands meeting, his voice crackling with the manic energy of someone who'd confused venture capital with actual success. Monday morning, we show Meridian Partners why ByteNest is the future of digital collaboration. Every line of code, every feature, every optimization we've built over the past year, it all comes together on Monday. Every optimization, including mine. I volunteered to work late Friday to finalize the deployment, framing it as dedication to the team's success. Sarah Kim practically glowed with approval. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we love to see," she said, making a note on her ever-present iPad. "Really stepping up when the company needs you most." Friday afternoon, I sat at my card table desk and made the final commit. Authentication system security enhancement, final optimization for production deployment. Scheduled to go live at 11:47 p.m., well after everyone had gone home to rest up for their big Monday presentation. I pushed the code to the main branch and watched as ByteNest's automated deployment system accepted my changes without question. No flags, no warnings, no requests for additional review. Just clean integration into their production environment. By Monday morning, only one person in the entire company would be able to access ByteNest's platform. And she wouldn't be answering her phone. Friday arrived with the nervous energy of a company that had bet everything on one presentation. The ByteNest office hummed with artificial enthusiasm, the kind of forced optimism that comes from people who know their careers depend on the next 48 hours going perfectly. At 3 p.m., Sarah Kim sent a company-wide Slack message that made my jaw clench. "Team, we need all hands on deck tonight to prep for Monday's big presentation. Pizza on the company. Let's show Meridian Partners what ByteNest hustle looks like. Rocket Pizza flex biceps. All hands. Unpaid hands in my case." I watched my colleagues react with the enthusiasm of people who'd been conditioned to confuse exploitation with opportunity. Tyler Chin responded with a fire emoji. Jake Morrison replied, "Let's go." Marcus added a gif of someone doing a victory dance. I typed back a simple thumbs up and mentally prepared for my final performance. By 6 p.m., the office had transformed into a tech bro carnival. Brad and Chad had ordered pizza from some artisanal place in Mission District, probably $30 per pie that tasted like regular pizza with a pretentious backstory. They made a big show of setting up the boxes in the kitchen, complete with a handwritten sign, "Fuel for Champions. Thanks for your amazing dedication." Amazing dedication. That's what they called working for free. Chloe. Marcus appeared at my desk with a paper plate containing 2 slices of lukewarm pizza and an expression of manufactured excitement. "How's the optimization work going?" "Everything ready for the big deploy." "Just running final tests," I said, accepting the pizza I couldn't afford to refuse. "Should be ready to push live around midnight." "Perfect. That's the kind of attention to detail that separates us from the corporate world." He paused dramatically, like he was about to share ancient wisdom. "You know, Sarah mentioned that your work on the authentication system has been really impressive. Shows real initiative." Initiative. Another ByteNest buzzword for unpaid labor. As the evening progressed, the office took on the atmosphere of a delusional pep rally. Brad and Chad had set up their phones to live stream the grind session on the company Instagram, narrating their employees' unpaid overtime like it was performance art. "Check it out, ByteNest family," Brad announced to his phone camera, panning across the office. "This is what passion looks like. Our incredible team, fueled by pizza and pure determination, putting in the work to change the world." I glanced up from my laptop as his camera swept past my corner. For a split second, I was in frame, the diversity checkbox, grinding away at her optimization work. I managed a smile and a small wave, playing my part perfectly. If only his followers knew what I was actually optimizing. Around 8 p.m., Sarah Kim organized an impromptu photo shoot. "We need content for the investor presentation," she announced, wielding her iPhone like a professional photographer. "Something that shows our collaborative culture and diverse team." There it was again. Diverse team. As if my melanin content was my primary contribution to their company culture. We gathered around the central workspace, a carefully curated mix of hoodies, laptops, and artificial smiles. I positioned myself in the back row, between Tyler Chin and a marketing intern whose name I'd never learned. The setup was perfect: young, diverse, innovative. Exactly the kind of image that made investors feel good about writing checks. "Everyone say disruption," Sarah called out, and we dutifully complied. Click. Flash. Evidence of ByteNest's amazing company culture, captured forever. One more. Brad jumped in, throwing his arm around Jake Morrison's shoulder. "This one's going straight to the investor deck. Show them what real innovation looks like." Real innovation. I bit back a laugh and smiled wider. After the photos, I retreated to my desk to run final tests on my masterpiece. The lockdown protocol was elegant in its simplicity, a digital deadbolt that would engage the moment anyone tried to access the system without my specific unlock sequence. I tested it dozens of times in isolated environments, but tonight I ran one final simulation to ensure perfection. The test results were beautiful. Clean, efficient, irreversible. Monday morning would bring ByteNest to a complete standstill, and there would be no fingerprints, no obvious sabotage, just a mysterious system failure that their senior developers would never be able to diagnose. Working hard, or hardly working? Jake Morrison appeared beside my desk, clearly buzzed from whatever craft beer Brad had broken out for the leadership team. His eyes were unfocused, his smile too wide. "Just making sure everything's perfect for Monday," I replied, minimizing my terminal window. "That's what I like to hear. You know, Chloe, you've really surprised me these past few weeks. When you first started, I wasn't sure you were ByteNest material, but this authentication optimization work. Really solid stuff. Really solid. Coming from a man who stored passwords in plain text." "Thanks, Jake. I'm just doing what I'm trained to do." "Exactly. That's the attitude we need around here." He swayed slightly, gesturing at the office full of unpaid workers. "This is what separates us from the big corporations. We're not just employees here, we're family. We grind together, we succeed together." Family. Right. The kind of family that pays some members and exploits others, then takes pictures to prove how functional they are. As Jake wandered away to evangelize about family values to someone else, I made my final commit. The authentication enhancement was now live in the production environment, scheduled to fully activate with the Monday morning system refresh. At 11:30 p.m., I gathered my belongings and prepared to leave. The office was still buzzing with caffeinated energy, people convinced they were living some entrepreneur fantasy instead of working unpaid overtime for someone else's dream. "Heading out?" Sarah Kim asked as I passed her desk. "Just for tonight," I said, shouldering my laptop bag. "Everything's ready for Monday." "Perfect. Thanks again for going above and beyond tonight." This is exactly the kind of team spirit that makes ByteNest special. I smiled one last time, the expression of a grateful intern who'd learned so much from this incredible opportunity. "Thank you for everything," I said. And I meant it. They taught me exactly who I was dealing with. I was somewhere outside Reno when ByteNest's world came crashing down. The Greyhound bus smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, filled with people who, like me, were traveling the cheapest way possible across a country that had chewed them up and spit them out. My seat reclined exactly 2 degrees, my knees were pressed against the seat in front of me, and I'd never been happier in my life. At 6:47 a.m. Pacific Time, my burner phone, a $30 prepaid device I'd bought specifically for this moment, buzzed with a first notification. A Twitter mention from ByteNest's official account. "Experiencing temporary login issues this morning. Our team is working quickly to resolve. Thanks for your patience." Rocket. Temporary login issues. I almost laughed out loud. By 7:15 a.m., the tone had shifted. Another tweet. "We're currently investigating login difficulties across our platform. Service restoration is our top priority. We'll keep you updated." I opened my laptop, balancing it carefully on the bus's fold-down tray table, and connected to the mobile hotspot I'd splurged on for this very occasion. My fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, accessing the burner email account I'd created weeks ago and subscribed to ByteNest's internal communication channels. The first internal email had arrived at 7:03 a.m., marked urgent. All hands. The subject line made me smile. Critical system failure. Immediate response needed. Team, we're experiencing a complete authentication system failure. No one can access any part of our platform. This includes admin accounts, developer access, and all client portals. Jake Morrison is leading the response team. All engineering staff report to office immediately. This is not a drill.
Brad.
Not a drill. But it was beautiful. I scrolled through my company's Slack notifications, watching panic spread through the digital channels like wildfire. The messages painted a picture of absolute chaos. Marcus Chun, 7:12 a.m. Can't get into admin panel. Getting error 401 on everything. Tyler Chun, 7:14 a.m. Same here. Even basic login is failing. Jake Morrison, 7:18 a.m. This looks like a coordinated attack. Starting emergency protocols. Sarah Kim, 7:21 a.m. Is everyone locked out? Even I can't access HR systems. Jake Morrison, 7:23 a.m. Everyone report status. Need to know scope of breach.
Breach.
They thought they'd been hacked. The irony was delicious. They were so convinced of their own incompetence that they assumed any sophisticated problem must be external. By 8 a.m., I could see the real-time panic unfolding across social media. ByteNest's clients were getting vocal on Twitter. At Tech Startup Daily. Anyone else unable to access at ByteNest this morning? We have a major presentation today and can't get to our files. At Digital Nomad Life. ByteNest completely down. This is exactly why you need backup solutions, people. At Startup Grind. ByteNest outage hitting right before major investor presentations.
Yikes.
This is why reliability matters more than fancy features. The bus rolled through Nevada's desert landscape while I watched ByteNest's reputation crumble in real time. Each notification, each frustrated tweet, each panicked Slack message was validation for every unpaid hour, every stolen credit, every moment they'd treated me like an invisible diversity prop. At 8:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with an incoming call from a San Francisco number I recognized. Jake Morrison, probably calling every current and former team member in desperation. I let it go to voicemail and immediately blocked the number. The internal emails were becoming increasingly frantic. Subject: Emergency. Potential security breach time. 8:42 a.m. All staff, we're treating this as a potential cyber attack. Our systems show no signs of external penetration, but someone with deep system knowledge has locked us out completely. We're bringing in external security consultants. If anyone has information about potential threats or suspicious activity, contact leadership immediately. Do not discuss this situation on social media.
Brad.
Too late. The internet had already noticed. Tech blogs were picking up the story, and ByteNest stock mentions were flooding with speculation about data breaches and security failures. Everything they'd worked to build, their reputation, their investor confidence, their Series B funding, was evaporating in real time. At 9:15 a.m., the most satisfying notification arrived. An email from Meridian Partners, the venture capital firm that was supposed to hand ByteNest $12 million after today's presentation. Subject: Postponement of investment review. Brad/Chad, given the current system outage and security concerns, we're postponing today's presentation indefinitely. We'll need a full security audit and incident report before proceeding with any investment discussions. Best regards, Jennifer Walsh, partner Meridian Partners. Indefinitely. I screenshot that email and saved it to a folder labeled Receipts. The bus pulled into a rest stop somewhere in Utah, and I allowed myself a moment to step outside and breathe the desert air. My phone buzzed constantly. More blocked calls from San Francisco numbers. More frantic notifications from ByteNest's collapsing digital presence. I opened Twitter one more time and saw that hashtag ByteNestDown was starting to trend. The company's official account had gone silent after their last "we're investigating" tweet, probably because even their social media manager couldn't log in to post updates. Standing in that Utah parking lot, watching tumbleweeds blow past the bus while my former employers experienced their digital apocalypse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. They'd called me a diversity checkbox. They'd stolen my work, ignored my expertise, and paid me in pizza and condescension. They'd assumed that invisible meant powerless. But I'd been patient. I'd documented everything. And when the moment was right, I'd used their own dismissiveness against them. My phone buzzed one more time. Another blocked call from San Francisco. I powered it off, climbed back onto the bus, and settled in for the long ride home. Behind me, ByteNest burned. 3 months later, I was debugging actual code in an actual office with an actual paycheck, and the contrast was so stark it felt like living in a parallel universe. Quinn Technologies sat in downtown Detroit, in a renovated building that had once manufactured automobiles and now manufactured software solutions for mid-sized businesses. No kombucha on tap, no ping-pong tables, no motivational quotes in cursive font. Just clean workstations, ergonomic chairs, and a coffee machine that dispensed regular coffee without requiring a trust fund to operate. My business card read Senior Security Engineer in plain black text. My salary was $68,000 plus benefits, which felt like winning the lottery after months of surviving on ramen and false promises. But more than the money, it was the respect that made me remember why I'd loved coding in the first place. "Nice work on the encryption protocol, Chloe," said David Chun, my manager, during our weekly one-on-one. He was reviewing the authentication system I designed for our newest client, ironically, a much more sophisticated version of what ByteNest desperately needed. "The client was impressed with your presentation. Clean implementation, thorough documentation, and you explained the technical concepts in terms their leadership team could understand." Explained the technical concepts. Not simplified them, not dumbed them down, but explained them. Like I was a professional whose expertise had value. "Thank you," I said and meant it. I enjoy the problem-solving aspect. Security architecture is like building puzzles that only the right people can solve. David laughed. "That's exactly what good security should be. By the way, I'm recommending you for the senior developer track. 6 months ahead of schedule, but your work speaks for itself." My work speaks for itself. For words that ByteNest had never allowed to be true. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, a real one-bedroom with a kitchen and everything, and finally allowed myself to Google what had become of my former employers. The results were even more satisfying than I'd hoped. ByteNest had never recovered from their mysterious system failure. Their Series B funding had evaporated when Meridian Partners pulled out permanently after a security audit revealed the catastrophic vulnerabilities in their platform. Apparently, when you can't log into your own system for 3 weeks, investors start asking uncomfortable questions about your technical competence. Brad and Chad had tried to spin it as a strategic pivot and planned infrastructure overhaul, but tech blogs weren't buying it. TechCrunch had run a particularly brutal piece titled "When Hustle Culture Meets Reality: The ByteNest Collapse," detailing how the company had burned through their series of funding while building a platform that a freshman computer science student could hack with basic SQL injection. The article quoted an anonymous former employee. They hired people based on connections rather than competence, then wondered why their code looked like it was written by someone who'd learned programming from YouTube tutorials. I'd bookmarked that article. Jake Morrison now worked for a corporate consulting firm, probably explaining to actual engineers why his revolutionary authentication ideas weren't gaining traction. Tyler Chun had moved back in with his parents in Berkeley and was exploring opportunities in the blockchain space, which was LinkedIn speak for unemployed. Marcus had landed on his feet at another startup, naturally. Incompetent white men always seemed to find soft places to land. But here's what made me smile. According to every article I could find, ByteNest's technical team had never identified the source of their system failure. They'd brought in expensive security consultants, rebuilt their entire platform from scratch, and implemented enterprise-grade monitoring systems. None of it mattered, because they'd never understood what had actually happened to them. My code was digital poetry, elegant, untraceable, and permanently woven into their corporate mythology as the incident we still don't understand. I closed my laptop and walked to my kitchen to make dinner. Real dinner with vegetables and protein, and the kind of ingredients I could afford now that I was being paid what I was worth. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Maya, who just started her master's program in computer science at Howard University. Hey cuz, how's the new job? Still loving the move back to Detroit? I typed back quickly. Love it. Best decision I ever made. Detroit's tech scene is growing, and they actually pay people here. How's Howard? Amazing but intense. My algorithms professor is brutal but brilliant. Hey, random question. A bunch of us are talking about internships next summer. Any advice on red flags to watch for? I stared at that message for a long time, thinking about Maya and all the other young Black women who would enter tech spaces with the same optimism I'd once had. The same vulnerability to exploitation disguised as opportunity. Always negotiate pay, even for internships. If they say, we don't usually pay interns, but that's a red flag. If they can't afford to pay you, they can't afford your work. Document everything. And remember, if you're the only one working for free in a room full of people getting paid, you're not gaining experience. You're being taken advantage of. That's really specific advice. I learned it the hard way. But here's the thing, Maya. Know your worth. Demand it. Never work for free again. Never work for free again. I like that. Mind if I make it my new motto? It's yours. Just promise me you'll remember it when someone offers you exposure instead of money. I set down my phone and looked around my apartment. My real apartment, paid for with my real salary, in a city that valued substance over style. No Bite Nest hoodie hanging in my closet. I'd left that behind in San Francisco, along with every other remnant of that chapter of my life. Some people might call what I did to Bite Nest revenge. I called it a lesson in consequences. They'd built their entire operation on the assumption that some people's work had value and others didn't. That some voices mattered and others were just diversity checkboxes to be tolerated. I'd simply shown them what happened when you underestimate the wrong person. My laptop chimed with a new email notification. Another job offer. This one from a Fortune 500 company looking for senior security engineers. The salary range started at $85,000. I smiled and marked it for review tomorrow. After all, I had options now. I had power, and I was never giving it away for free again.